ever female and Republican Attorney General in the state of Arkansas. Leslie Rutledge is our guest this morning. Attorney General Rutledge, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, David, for having me on. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. You know, on Inauguration Day, the governor, rightfully so, gets a lot of attention. The 6 other constitutional officers, you all also got sworn in. Give me a sense of kind of what you're finding in the AG's office. I know just a few days in, but as you settle in, how this is all working.
Well, Tuesday was an amazing day. I had my parents with me. My father held the Bible. And we, a tremendous time taking office. We had done so much to prepare for taking office for the last couple of months in transition that when we walked in, we hit the ground running. The citizens of Arkansas, as far as we're concerned, we have not missed a beat in taking care of them and making sure that those services are provided, whether it's the consumer protection services or the training that we provide through law enforcement. And just on Tuesday, my first act was to speak to a group of law enforcement officers that were receiving a training from our office about school safety.
When you look at previous attorney generals, and I know you talked about this during the campaign, that you wouldn't, have your own bills you'd like to see passed. Can you kind of maybe remind folks why you don't really feel that's what you want this office to be? Because so much of an AG's presence we see at the state capitol in committee rooms lobbying for legislation.
Sure, absolutely. And the role of the Attorney General is to advise the legislators, to advise state agencies, and that's what I want to make sure that the Office of the Attorney General is doing. Certainly, we are reviewing the bills, we're talking to legislators, visiting with the governor's staff to make sure that what they pass out of those committees and out of the legislature and the governor signs, that it will be upheld to challenge in courts. That's the role of the Attorney General, is to make sure that we have solid laws that if they're challenged, that will be upheld, and to enforce and defend the law. It is not to have your own legislative agenda and package. We're certainly keeping an eye on matters that are of interest, such as human trafficking, cyber crimes, to make certain that whatever the legislature does pass, that it's legal and that we can aggressively go after these predators.
How did the transition go from Election Day up until now? Because I know at one point, I think in December, I reached out to you. I was looking to maybe talk with you, and one of your representatives told me that you were going to interview people all day long, nonstop, a staff of well over 100. How that all kind of plays out?
A staff of over 170, and I interviewed every one of them individually. We conducted a number of external interviews as well. That was a wonderful learning tool for me and my transition team, as well as for the staff to get to know me. And from that, we were able to make decisions with regard to personnel and make sure that my vision for the office of going after criminals, internet predators, what we want to do with consumer protection to make certain that our citizens are taken care of, that we're able to see that vision out, if you will, and to have I told everyone that came through, my interest is being the best lawyers in the state on behalf of the citizens of Arkansas, and to do everything to the letter of the law and to enforce and defend the law.
You mentioned not wanting to push a legislative package, but there are things that you want to see done. A lot of that you talked about in the campaign as far as federal oversight, federal overreach goes. I know your predecessor, Attorney General McDaniel, filed kind of at your request dealing with the executive action that the president took as it relates to undocumented immigrants. Your thoughts on those, on that particular issue, and what other similar items do you want to pursue?
Sure, and one thing I did talk about, as you mentioned, was federal overreach and the role of the Attorney General's office in combating that. That is why I went to my predecessor and asked him to go ahead and join that immigration lawsuit on behalf of Arkansas. And that is a prime example, and the Congress is dealing with it now, of where the president and his administration went beyond the scope of what they're allowed to do and forcing states to implement things. We're also looking at the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, their regulations that they force on states.
Specifically the clean air.
Yes, the 111D proposed rule on the carbon emissions. That is something that we have had our eye on from the very beginning. I know that Governor Hutchinson has also had his eye on that as well, and hope to work with the governor's office on these.
Okay, so on the EPA rule, no thoughts have changed on that at all. Obviously, the rule, we know it's not final till what, June, but the kind of philosophical theory is try to stop it before it ever comes out.
Yes, absolutely, because once those rules are put into place, as we've seen with so many things, it's hard to unring the bell.
Same-sex marriage, a couple things. One, I know just before McDaniel left, they filed a notice to appeal to the 8th Circuit. How is that process going? Do you expect that to actually get to a point where it'll be heard in St. Louis, or based off of what we learned late on Friday that the U.S. Supreme Court is ultimately going to take up this issue at some point, that perhaps that Arkansas's case doesn't get there?
We are moving those appeals forward. The Assistant Attorney General that had argued that case will be in the state Supreme Court, will be handling that case as well. Colin Jorgensen, on behalf of the state of Arkansas. We are going to continue appealing those cases and moving them forward. And the United States Supreme Court may very well, in fact, hear a case that affects Arkansas before the 8th Circuit makes its decision, or before the Arkansas Supreme Court makes its decision.
So still some work to be done there, and that's something I think you feel at some point the U.S. Supreme Court's going to have to make a decision on? I
believe that they will, yes.
Okay, makes sense. One thing I wanted to also look at is you mentioned, the amount of drug courts that are out there. I know that's something you talked about as well in the last minute here. Governor Hutchinson's talked about wanting to increase the amount of drug courts as a way to have fewer people, go through the prison system. Is that an emphasis in your office? It
is, and one thing that I believe the governor's talked about, I know I've talked about for a number of years, is lowering what's called the recidivism rate. So once individuals have committed a crime, that they don't continue to go back to prison or continue to commit those same crimes. And that's why drug courts are so important and can be effective in that regard, because they change and save lives, and they alter people's patterns, they alter their actions, so that way, rather than falling back into the same bad habits and committing those criminal acts, they instead find a job and they become productive, good members of society. And that's ultimately, for the most part, who those people want to be and who we want them to be.
Changing behavior, I think that's a term we've heard a lot from Governor Hutchinson. I anticipate we'll probably hear that more as well. Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it.